You're listening to Real Life, No Filter, where raw emotions and real moments take center stage. No masks, no filters. Just honest stories about life, love, and everything in between. Get comfortable. We're about to begin. The ringtone of a smartphone, piercing the silence closer to noon on a perfectly ordinary working Thursday, once again divided Sarah's life into a happy period before and an almost hopeless one after. The familiar word lit up on the screen. Mom. Although calls in the middle of the day were not a frequent occurrence, the woman felt no bad premonitions about it. Who knew? Maybe Mom missed her or wanted advice on choosing an outfit. Sarah put a pencil point on the margin of the sheet with the contract draft for the client and hurried to answer the call so as not to worry her loved one with a long wait. As soon as she heard her mother's voice, which seemed unusually muffled, her heart plummeted somewhere down. It was obvious that something not at all joyful had happened, and the assumption, unfortunately, was confirmed. Sally, hello? Please don't worry too much. It just happened that I'm in the hospital right now. Sarah became alarmed. Mum, what happened? Which hospital are you in? What are the doctors saying? What should I bring? What's the room number? The voice from the receiver interrupted the stream of questions. Sally, I beg you, don't worry. It all happened like in a movie. I slipped, fell, almost lost consciousness. But everything's fine. My neighbour Linda was passing by. She cheered me up and supported me while we waited for the ambulance. The doctor said everything will be fine, but I'll have to stay for a little while. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have rushed over, helped. I didn't want to bother you in the middle of your workday, but visiting hours are in the evening, from 4 to 7, and if you go home first from the office, then to the pharmacy, I was afraid you might not make it. So please write down what you need to bring here. The main things are my insurance policy and a phone charger. Water, too, not sparkling, because for some reason I'm really thirsty. Invisible to Sarah, her mother sighed, and the woman vividly imagined how her loved one's face must have been contorted by pain shock, and she hurried to end the conversation, clarifying the hospital and room number. Sarah reread the list of everything her mother had dictated, added chicken broth, wet wipes, and with shaky legs went to ask her boss for time off. Mr. Harrison, may I please leave early today? I have personal circumstances. My mother was hospitalized. The boss, a friend of Sarah's husband from their student years, expressed polite words of sympathy, and upon learning which hospital his subordinate's mother was in, he encouraged her and inquired, "The doctors in our regional hospital are good. Maybe the setting isn't too luxurious, but both the equipment and the staff are top-notch. I've been in that hospital several times and was discharged feeling brand new. So everything will be fine. Don't get discouraged. By the way, are you driving today or is Jake using the car? Maybe Bill can give you a ride." Sarah was touched by her boss's concern and decided she wasn't in a position to refuse the offered help. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. That would be very helpful. I won't keep the driver long. I just need to stop by Mum's house, that's all. I won't keep Bill any longer than that. I'll gather the necessary things there, and then I'll call a taxi. Thank you." The manager wished Sarah good luck and promised, "Come out to the central entrance in 15 minutes. I'll tell Bill to wait for you at your mother's house and drop you off at your and Jake's family nest. He has to come back for me anyway, and your house is on the way." Thanking her considerate boss again, Sarah went to turn off her computer and tidy up her workspace. She took the contract with her so as not to let the whole team down and to finish the necessary work by the next morning. The woman barely registered the meaning of the stories the driver tried to entertain her with. but she was even grateful that the stream of his chatter forced her to react somehow and prevented her from descending into anxious thoughts. Following the list, checking off each item, Sally gathered things in her mother's apartment, watered her favorite flowers, turned off the gas and water just in case, checked the refrigerator for anything perishable, collected the trash to throw out, and only then went downstairs and continued on with the talkative Bill. Not far from Sarah and Jacob's house was a supermarket with a pharmacy section, and the woman decided to stop there on the way. Asking Bill to stop near the dumpster area, she threw out the collected trash and hurried in for groceries. Moving almost on autopilot, Sally bought everything she needed and soon was simultaneously preparing dinner for her husband and broth for her mother. While the food was boiling and baking, Sarah called Jacob and explained the situation. "Jake, Mum's in the hospital. I'm going to her. I don't know yet how long I'll be there. Dinner will be on the stove." The man admitted, "I know. Ed told me you needed support. Wait for me. I'll try to get home early and we'll go to the hospital together. You never know what else might be needed. And I'll be there to help out." Jacob didn't let his wife down and, picking her up along with the 2 bags she had packed, drove her to the hospital. Sarah managed to persuade the nurse receiving deliveries to let her see her mother and the attending physician, who, fortunately, was there. Jacob stayed waiting for his wife in the hall, but verbally sent good wishes and hopes for a speedy recovery. Mary tried to smile when she saw Sally enter the room, but it was clear that she was uncomfortable and scared. The woman quietly but distinctly greeted everyone in the room and went to her mother's bed. A weight was suspended from the unfortunate woman's right leg. Her lips, bitten almost to bleeding, eloquently testified to how much pain the victim of the ice had been in. Sarah listened to her mother's story about how she got into the predicament and, trying not to cry, began arranging everything she had brought into the bedside table. The phone was immediately put on charge. Sally gave her mother the broth she had cooked and made her eat a few spoonfuls of raw, finely grated carrots. The internet says this kind of salad is the best vitamin remedy in the first few days after an injury. Then I'll give you some sour berry juice. That's good too. "Oh, honey, don't worry. You should probably go. Jacob will come home. He'll probably be surprised you're not there." Sally explained that her husband knew what had happened, had rushed home so she wouldn't have to take a taxi, that he wasn't allowed in, but he sent his regards. As if she had only been waiting for this remark, the woman lying on the neighbouring bed became active. "The orderlies and nurses here are rude and boorish," she interjected into the conversation. "You can't call them day or night. They're just drinking tea and circling the doctors. Giving them chocolates, even money, is useless. They still do their duties half-heartedly." Sarah remained silent and, having found out her mother's doctor's name and patronymic, went to look for him. The restless neighbour didn't miss the opportunity to comment here either. "If he's not in the doctor's lounge, check the dressing room. He's probably sweet-talking someone there." Thanking the grumbler dryly, Sally went out into the corridor. The nurses in the trauma department, used to all sorts of patients' relatives, tears, and hysterics, looked at the visitor asking how to find the doctor with a mixture of irritation and weariness. But one of them, who seemed like the head nurse, answered thoroughly. "Dr. Miller is currently in the head of department's office, down that end of the corridor, the second to last door. You can wait there or sit here on the bench near the doctor's lounge." Sally waited for the doctor, and when he learned that she was Mary's daughter, he invited her into the office. Showing an X-ray on the computer screen, Dr. Miller explained, "If I can put it this way, your mother's fracture turned out to be a good one. Generally, there are 2 treatment options." The man began to describe the nuances of each method, then asked, "Which option have you decided on?" Sarah looked the doctor in the eye but didn't answer, instead asking a counter question. Tell me, Dr. Miller, for example, if a patient with a fracture like my mother's was someone personally close to you, what would you recommend? Smiling, the doctor replied briefly, osteosynthesis. In a very similar case with my aunt, our head of department performed a similar operation. She's been leading an active life again for a year now, even working in her garden, so I can't keep up with her. The woman clarified all the details of the upcoming operation, wrote down what else needed to be brought for the post-operative period, and, saying goodbye to the doctor, left the office. Sally had to inform her mother that the operation was scheduled for the very next day, and, composing herself, the woman presented it as lightly as possible, trying not to distress her loved one. I'll come by tomorrow. I'll meet you after the operation. Everything will be fine. Don't worry. Sally, what about your work? Your boss will probably be angry. Don't worry about that. I'll get all the work done and won't let you or my boss down. With the operation, the long road to Mary being able to walk again had only just begun. For 2 weeks, Sally visited her mother almost daily to feed her and take care of her. The woman tried to object and repeatedly stated, Sally, take care of yourself. Don't come to me so often. They feed me well here, and I don't have much appetite anyway. How could I, if I'm not expending any energy? However, Mary couldn't persuade her daughter. When the day of discharge arrived, Sarah went to the doctor for recommendations. Dr. Miller was cautious and warned. Your mother is a very energetic lady, but I've expressed my point of view, and I'll repeat it to you. I wouldn't be overly optimistic if I were you. But you don't need to despair either, although she absolutely cannot bear full weight on the injured limb. Crutches will be Mary's best friends for at least the next month, and even after that, she needs to be careful. Moving is necessary, of course, but cautiously. Preventive care is indicated to prevent bed sores. In 6 weeks, I'll expect her for a follow-up X-ray to check the stage of bone fusion. That seems to be everything. Sarah clarified. Maybe some vitamins for Mom to take? Dr. Miller shrugged. In principle, yes, but generally, the rehabilitation plan should be explained to you at the local clinic. Sarah called a special taxi, specializing in transporting people with limited mobility, and after a heroic overcoming of the access streets, Mary finally found herself in her apartment. A new problem arose for Sally. Her mother's physical condition was still far from ideal, and even a simple trip to the bathroom or kitchen could result in a new injury. Initially, Sarah came to Mary's twice a day, and by the time the New Year holidays approached, she was practically exhausted. Traffic jams took up so much time that only a miserable few hours were left for sleep. Sally turned to her husband. Jacob, how about we have Mum stay with us for a while? At least I won't have to race between apartments. The man's face darkened, and after a heavy pause, he replied, Sandra, I think the world of your mother, Mary, is a wonderful woman. But forgive me, I'll be direct. We simply have nowhere to put her here. As you know, we have a studio apartment. The room is large in size, but there's only one. When I tried to persuade you to take out a mortgage, I didn't find understanding. Both you and your mother were against it. Jake, well, couldn't we put up some kind of screen? It would be like 2 rooms. Listen, it would be uncomfortable for Mary first and foremost. I play computer games loudly. I listen to music until late. Besides, ask her yourself if she'll agree to move. I can say with 100% certainty that she'll say no. Your mother is very tactful and wise, and understands that the further away she lives, the better her relationship with her son-in-law will be. Jacob was right. Mary, as soon as she heard the idea of moving into her son-in-law and daughter's apartment, just snorted indignantly. There can't even be a discussion. Home walls help. I won't go to your place, especially since it will be uncomfortable to be sick there quietly. Sally submitted to her mother's will, and besides, she didn't want to argue with her husband at all. She continued to spend time stuck in traffic, and she had to leave her lawyer position at Mr. Harrison's firm. With her boss's permission, Sarah transferred to part-time work and was very glad that the manager had been able to accommodate her. She prepared contracts during her visits, trained her successor, and diligently performed all duties that didn't require constant presence in the office. However, rehabilitation cost much more money than the woman could have imagined. Sometimes she shared her indignation with her husband about how pharmacies changed prices at will and tried to sell the most expensive version of medication. And then Jacob would grumble, "Listen, Sandra, but surely your mother should be provided with some free medications?" The woman tried not to answer this. After all, the family budget didn't suffer, and she hadn't asked her husband for money in the almost 6 months that had passed since the fateful news of her mother's troubles. Sally generally tried to handle this situation herself, without involving Jacob. The weather changed, but Sarah's schedule, by established tradition, remained almost unchanged. In the morning, she prepared breakfast for her husband, and, if she had time, prepared lunch and dinner. Then, packing part of the breakfast into a container, she rushed to her mother's, stopping by the store and pharmacies on the way. Care, maintaining her mood, and helping her move around the apartment took a lot of time. Then Sally would stop by the office and rush home by evening. In case of any emergencies, the key to her mother's apartment was with her neighbour, the same Linda who had helped her wait for the ambulance. She sometimes came over to watch television together and gossip about something, so Mary couldn't be called abandoned. But Sally desperately wanted to get her mother back on her feet quickly, and not just because she had to spend a lot of time on daily trips, without days off or holidays, between quite distant areas of the city. It was simply because her mother was the closest person to her. She had, in essence, given Sarah life twice. The first time on her birthday 38 years ago, but most importantly later, when a terrible tragedy struck Sally like an avalanche of grief. It was her mother who was there during those dark days, helping her move when her legs almost gave out from nervous shock, forcing her to drink and eat, sometimes against her will. Abandoning her well-paying, not too taxing job, her mother sold her apartment in their hometown and, almost like a huge, clumsy bundle, moved her 2,000 kilometers away from the place where everything reminded Sarah of her inhuman grief. It was Mary who made her get a job where it was almost impossible to be alone with her sad thoughts, where she had to look stylish and put together. Sally didn't consider her help to her mother a sacrifice and, despite her fatigue, tried to surround her husband with care as well, especially since their 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and the woman wanted to arrange a touching congratulation and a pleasant surprise for the patient Jacob. She had prepared a preliminary menu in advance, found a confectionery that took orders for individual designs, and arranged for the preparation of an unusual-shaped cake for her husband, who adored sweets. The holiday was approaching, but shortly before it arrived, Jacob warned during breakfast one morning. "Excuse me, Sarah. I need the car for a few days. I need to go to the neighbouring region, to the branch office. It seems the branch manager there is messing with the reports. Profits have dropped significantly, although everything is stable in other divisions, and there's even growth in some places. I'll try to be quick, of course, but planes probably won't fly to those parts, and I really don't fancy going by train. Can you manage without the car?" Although Sarah herself had been counting on their trusty family car, she didn't argue. After all, her husband genuinely needed the car more. She smiled. "Of course I'll manage." Jacob politely thanked her for breakfast and promised, "Don't worry, We'll buy you a metal horse too. Things at work will normalize a bit, and you can choose the model." Hurrying out of the house, the man kissed his wife on the cheek, winked, and said, "Don't worry. I remember our wedding anniversary. I'll try to be back by Friday evening." Taking advantage of her husband's absence, Sarah moved in with her mother for a while to save time on travel. During these few days, she managed to do a thorough cleaning, and the apartment felt particularly fresh and spring-like. Only the day before the holiday did Sally have to return home to bring an urgently needed diploma to the office. However, this was even convenient, because she also needed to clean up at home and prepare some of Jacob's favourite salads. In the morning, the woman, taking the holiday treats she had set aside in separate containers, rushed back to her mother's. She habitually gave her a massage, helped her walk around the room, and even after waiting for the elevator repair to finish, finally took her mother outside so she could enjoy the good weather and the feeling that life was returning to what it was before the injury. After a short walk, Mary and Sally had lunch, and the daughter began to apologize. "Mum, please forgive me. I'm leaving a little earlier today. I want to prepare a surprise for Jake. Your keys are with you if you get tired of watching TV, your phone is charged. If anything happens, call." "Okay, run along, Sally. Happy holiday to you and Jake. Imagine, 10 years already." Kissing her mother, Sarah ran along the route she had planned in advance. Spring, which had long been in full swing and was rapidly approaching summer, offered gentle warmth, and the sweet tart scent of blooming lilac set a most romantic mood. Contrary to the popular belief that marrying in May brings trouble, she hadn't suffered in her second marriage. On the contrary, Jacob was a quiet harbour for the woman. There were no stormy passions between them, but there was mutual affection and respect. Sarah valued her husband for not prying into her soul, for not tormenting her with jealousy and suspicion, for not demanding that she bear him an heir. Even when he first declared the seriousness of his intentions, Sally had told him directly and honestly that children were absolutely not in her plans. This statement did not frighten the man. A few years after the wedding, Jake asked if she had changed her mind about a child, but upon hearing a categorical no, he didn't inquire about the reasons and never brought up the topic again. The man was a good partner, and of course she loved him in her own way, with all the strength her wounded heart was capable of. Following the list she had made the day before, Sally bought drinks, got the squid that Jacob adored, and bought various small things: a crispy baguette, fresh green salad, fruits. Gradually, she filled 2 large shopping bags that Sarah had thoughtfully brought with her. Hanging them on both shoulders, she stopped by the confectionery where she had ordered the cake. Now she could go home. Approaching the entrance, Sarah looked hopefully at their family parking spot and sighed with relief. The car wasn't there. This meant she would have time to set the table, hang balloons, and get dressed before her husband returned. Mentally praising herself for the convenient bags that left one hand free, the woman, hastily opening the door, finally found herself in their family nest. Placing the cake box on the bench, Sally suddenly froze in surprise. An unfamiliar sound was brazenly intruding into the usual hum of the apartment building, coming from the kitchen. Strange. There were no unfamiliar shoes on the mat, no foreign items were visible, but she could clearly hear the clinking of dishes, as if someone was moving a heavy plate or a large mug. Jacob and Sarah didn't keep pets. They had always wanted to get a nice dog, but the misfortune with her mother had altered that plan. It would probably have been much smarter to go back out onto the landing, close the door, and call her husband. But from exhaustion, Sarah didn't act as safety dictated. Automatically slipping off her sneakers and with the bag still on her shoulders, the woman entered the kitchen and almost collapsed from surprise. A boy who looked about 6 years old was sitting on a chair with one leg tucked under him. The unknown little guest was completely engrossed in eating. On the table in front of him were Jacob's enormous mug, a bottle of water, and a large, deep plate in which Sally had layered a salad the night before, so it would soak. A spoon sticking out from the edge clearly indicated that the dish had already been unceremoniously sampled. The child was biting into a stick of smoked sausage with appetite, and the woman, overwhelmed by memories, felt a pang in her heart. It was too painful to act rationally. For a few seconds, Sally even thought she was hallucinating from fatigue or some other reason. However, the vision was too realistic. The sound, the image, and even the aroma of the sausage. The engrossed boy only looked up from his tasty activity after Sarah, her voice slightly hoarse from nervous shock, attracted his attention with a question. "Hey, hello, who are you? And what are you doing here?" The boy jumped up from the chair and, without letting go of the sausage, reported, "My name is Timmy Smith. Uncle Jake brought me here, told me to wait for him. He said I could eat whatever I wanted. So I'm eating. The sausage is tasty, just very salty." It didn't even occur to Sarah that the person the boy called Uncle Jake was not her husband, Jacob. Such an incredible coincidence, like in a traditional New Year's movie where the hero doesn't realize he's opened someone else's apartment with his keys and is completely unfazed by the typical setting of a standard apartment, simply couldn't happen. Sarah could confidently vouch that it would be hard to find a design even remotely similar to their home. Of course, there must be a logical explanation for the boy's appearance in the kitchen, the woman thought. She herself had married Jacob in the spring, and the surname Smith meant absolutely nothing to her. Her husband was the only child of his parents, but as far as Sally knew, he had cousins. However, they hadn't been invited to their modest wedding, and she didn't know them not only by face, but also by surname. So it was quite possible that Timmy Smith sitting in front of her was the child of one of her husband's cousins. But why had he brought this boy to their apartment without even warning her? Thrown off balance, Sarah couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she hadn't even managed to come up with any plausible version when Jacob called. Emerging from her stupor, Sally finally took the bags off her shoulders and answered the call. The man began speaking quickly, literally not giving his wife a word. "Darling, we just missed each other. I just left Mary's apartment, and I'll be home in literally 20 minutes and explain everything to you. In the meantime, set the table." The confused woman cheered up slightly and replied briefly, "Okay." She felt Timmy's gaze very distinctly, but couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. The woman brought her new flip-flops from the hallway, which she had just bought in anticipation of the approaching summer season, and offered, "Timmy, it's hot indoors in sneakers. Here, take these slippers, put them on. It will be more comfortable and convenient." The child silently obeyed. To ease the tension and occupy the boy who had been dropped off, but at the same time avoid having to talk to him much, Sally asked, "Timmy, can you inflate balloons?" The boy nodded. The woman quickly went to the room, brought the child a whole package, opened it, then, obeying some impulse, rinsed the tips through which Timmy was to inflate the balloons and handed them over, asking, "Don't inflate them too much. When you get tired, rest, and I'll help you tie them. Agreed?" The child nodded busily and, without any embarrassment, asked, "Is your name Sandra?" Sally shrugged. "My name can be changed in different ways. Sandra, Sally, and Sasha." Timmy's eyes widened in surprise. "But that's what boys are called. Are you a man or something?" Sarah chuckled. "No, I'm not a man. It's just a versatile name, like Jean or Val." Silence fell in the kitchen. The boy, lost in thought, occupied himself with the balloons. Sally, keeping an eye on her guest out of the corner of her eye, began unpacking the bags, preparing what she had planned, and gradually setting the table. The woman put the cake in the refrigerator, and pausing to tie the balloons Timmy had inflated, felt not irritation, but a gnawing pain. She wasn't angry with her husband, but all sorts of thoughts kept swirling in her head. The woman felt the curious gaze of the little guest on her, but didn't dare to look him in the eye. So they observed each other, but barely spoke. Lost in her chores, Sarah didn't even notice Jacob enter the kitchen with a huge bouquet of roses in his hands and a large bag. The man put his load on the floor and handed the flowers to his wife. "Sandra, congratulations to you and me on our special day. I see you've already met Timmy, made friends. That's wonderful. Well then, let's celebrate." The boy, visibly cheerful after Jacob's arrival, said modestly, "Congratulations." And when everyone sat down at the table after the inevitable fuss, he boasted loudly, "Uncle Jake, I inflated the balloons myself, and Sally helped me tie them. We prepared a good surprise for you." The adult man mumbled something indistinctly in response to the little guest's chatter, praising Timmy and his wife, who hadn't even touched the food. There was tension in the apartment, and Jacob set about rectifying the situation. He quietly turned on some music and began enthusiastically praising the dishes his wife had prepared. Then he proposed a toast to Sarah's beauty and charm, took a small box from his pocket, handed it to her, and said, "Congratulations. I hope you like it." The woman, confused by assumptions and thoughts about why her husband had brought the child into the apartment, only now remembered her own gift. Leaving the not-so-cheerful company for a moment, Sarah, clutching the unopened box in her hand, took out the hidden present. Returning to the table, she handed her husband the wrapped gift and limited herself to a curt phrase, "Happy tin anniversary." Jacob, hastily tearing open the wrapping paper, began loudly admiring the tin flask and proceeded to show the gift he had received to Timmy. The woman felt uncomfortable and again sank into her thoughts. This was not at all how she had imagined celebrating their wedding anniversary. She had wanted to prepare a surprise, but her husband had managed not just to surprise her, but to completely throw her off balance in the most literal sense. "More surprises!" Sally coughed violently, choking on mineral water, when she heard the question addressed to her. "Sandra, Timmy will stay with us for a couple of weeks, okay?" Sarah was silent, not knowing what to say. Jacob tried to explain. "I stopped by Mary's to pick you up. On the way home, I wanted to explain everything to you, but I didn't have time, and this is the surprise that happened. I'm sorry I didn't think to warn you, but I was sure I'd find you at your mum's and would warn you on the way that we had a guest." Jacob's monologue ended with a prolonged silence. Sarah moved the food on her plate with a fork, not raising her eyes to her husband. He, flustered, also didn't know what else to say in his defense. With childish spontaneity, Timmy broke the silence, asking brightly, "Aunt Sandra, thank you. I've already eaten. Can I try the cake now?" The boy showed his empty plate. With a stone face, Sarah got up from her chair and went to the refrigerator. She wanted to scream, stomp her feet, sob, and smash the dishes, which were as stained as her faith in her husband's honesty. She knew it wouldn't make things easier. The most likely explanation for Jacob bringing Timmy to the apartment seemed to her to be the version about her husband's infidelity. With her whole being, Sally now hated the man she had loved for 10 years, as much as she was capable. Jacob, who knew his wife well, guessed from her jerky movements that in a little while she would directly express everything on her mind, and decided to take the little guest away from the table to the seating area, where he could be distracted from the serious conversation about to happen between the adults. Timmy, let's go. I'll turn on the game console for you. Truthfully, my games are mostly complex, but we can find something to your taste online, or I can put on cartoons for you if you want. Will I be able to eat the cake? The boy asked interestedly. Of course. You can have anything there. The boy's eyes sparkled. He trustingly followed the apartment's owner to the cozy, soft seating area. Sarah, hearing her husband and guests' conversation, cut a large piece of cake, carefully placed it on a plate, turned on the electric kettle, and watched attentively as it boiled. The click of it turning off brought her out of her reverie. Having brewed tea, the woman placed a cup of the tasty drink, a sugar bowl with a spoon, and the plate with cake on a tray, and then carried it to the table near the apartment's gaming area. Jacob was showing Timmy his collection of computer games, but the boy, who was clearly well-mannered, tore himself away from the engaging activity and thanked him. "Thank you very much." The woman nodded and, turning sharply, left. When Jacob entered the kitchen, he found a strange scene. Sarah was sitting on the floor, holding dirty children's sneakers, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. The man tried to joke. "Hey, Sandra, what's wrong?" "Big deal. A child walked into the kitchen in dirty shoes. We'll turn on the robot vacuum now, let it work. It's nothing. Is it really worth getting upset over a little dust? Especially since it's a holiday today?" Sarah looked at her husband in a way that made him uncomfortable and said quietly, "Jake, I think I've told you repeatedly that I don't want to be in the same space with children for long. It's beyond my strength. Probably your action, or as you put it, surprise, had significant circumstances, and you can be understood. Only, forgive me, I have no desire whatsoever to deal with explanations today. Right now, I'm going to my mum's, and I need a little—" Jacob couldn't understand the reason for his wife's categorical decision, but clearly saw that Sally was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, so he suggested, "Sandra, I'm truly very sorry I didn't warn you, but I can explain everything. I think that when you listen to me, you'll understand that I simply couldn't have acted differently. I'll wait until you're ready to talk." The woman unexpectedly carefully placed the children's sneakers on the floor, wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, and walked towards the door, as if she hadn't heard her husband. Jacob took his wife's hand and asked, "Sandra, wait a minute. I'll call a taxi to Mary's house so I don't have to worry about you." Sally nodded, and soon was riding in the car, fidgeting with the innocent strap of her handbag. The road was clear, and the journey to her mother's house took much less time than during peak hours. As soon as the woman opened the door, she heard, "Linda, come in, dear. I'm not feeling very well." Sarah closed the door behind her and, taking off her shoes, went into her mother's bedroom. Mary was startled to see her daughter. "Sally, why are you back? Didn't Jacob come home? By my calculations, your wedding anniversary celebration should be in full swing, and for some reason, you're here. Honey, what happened?" Sarah went to her mother's bed, sat down directly on the floor, and leaning her head against Mary's hand, recounted everything that had happened from the moment she returned home and saw Timmy there. Finishing her story, Sally voiced her assumption. "Mum, I'm almost certain that Timmy is Jacob's illegitimate son. The boy looks about 6 years old, which means my husband was cheating on me and even had the nerve to present me with proof of his infidelity right on our wedding anniversary." Mary tried to calm her daughter. "I'm sure Jacob can explain everything. I feel that he loves you. Believe my experience, he would hardly risk his relationship with you and cheat." However, Sally cried non-stop. The woman stroked her daughter, who was so grown up but helpless and sobbing, but said no more words because all of them were powerless. Finally, When the flood of tears subsided, Sarah silently got up from the floor and went to wash her face, swollen from crying. The woman felt completely drained. Returning to her mother's room, Sally admitted, "I'm very tired today. Do you mind if I lie down?" Mary didn't object or suggest, for example, talking more or having dinner. She understood that her unhappy daughter needed to rest. "Of course, Sally. But let's take some kind of sedative together. Maybe valerian drops or something. It will be good for both of us." Sally did as her mother asked and went to sleep. The nervous tension was so strong that the woman passed out and woke up when the clock showed 10 in the morning. Jumping up from the sofa, Sally rushed to the kitchen, where she found her mother mixing pancake batter. "Good morning, honey. You're right on time. We'll have breakfast now." Working together, the women made pancakes and, as if by agreement, didn't mention yesterday's situation. As Sally washed the dishes, Mary asked, "Honey, please go to the theatre with Linda. She has 2 tickets for a very good play, excellent seats in the stalls." Her niece gave them to her for her birthday. They were supposed to go together. And just as luck would have it, the niece got sick, and the other relatives can't keep Linda company. Some are called by their dachas, some are flying on business trips. In short, the ticket is going to waste. It's a shame. Sally shook her head. "Mum, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not in the mood at all." However, if Mary had something in mind, she knew how to get her way. "That's precisely why you should go, because you're not in the mood. Art is excellent at switching your thoughts and changing your emotions. Please, honey, not for the sake of the wasted ticket, but for my sake." Although Sarah had to obey her mother's wish, she categorically refused the suggestion to stop by the hairdresser beforehand for a new haircut. Waiting until Linda had taken Sally away, Mary called her son-in-law and said in practically a commanding tone, "Jacob, Sarah will be gone for about 3 hours. Come over, we need to talk." The man didn't resist, but warned, "Mary, I'll definitely come, but I have no one to leave Timmy with. I could probably find a hired nanny, but I wouldn't trust the boy to just anyone. So I can only come with him. Do you mind?" The woman sighed. "I don't mind." "Excellent. Then I'll be at your place with Timmy in half an hour." 30 minutes later, Mary, carefully walking to the door, leaning on a steady walker, let Jacob and Timmy into the apartment. The man introduced the child, and the boy politely said hello. The hostess tried not to show her incredible anxiety and hospitably invited Timmy into the kitchen. "Come in. I have a TV there, and pastries are waiting for you. Shall I make cocoa or tea?" The child announced that coffee was tastiest for him, but children shouldn't drink it often, and he would have tea because he was too grown up for cocoa. Mary almost laughed in surprise, but quickly controlled her emotions and, turning to Jacob, asked, "Can I offer Timmy a chicory drink then? It's almost like coffee." The boy was delighted. "I want to try this chicory. Uncle Jake, can I?" Jacob agreed, and when the hostess skillfully managed to prepare the treat for Timmy, the man handed the boy his smartphone and explained, "I need to talk to Mary. Please stay here, eat the treat, play on the phone, maybe even watch some videos online, okay?" "Of course, Uncle Jake. I can manage without supervision, don't worry." Watching this scene, Mary could barely hold back tears and, hiding her emotions, slowly began to walk towards the room she old-fashionedly called the drawing room. Jacob followed her, eager to know what Mary wanted to talk about. The woman settled into an armchair, and the man sat on the sofa diagonally opposite her, so it would be comfortable to talk. The hostess watched her son-in-law attentively, but he didn't wait long and asked without preamble, "Mary, Explain to me why Sarah reacted so inadequately to Timmy's appearance in our apartment. I admit, part of the blame is mine for not warning her. But we are adults. Instead of talking calmly, she practically just ran away to you. Is that normal? The woman didn't interrupt her son-in-law's indignant speech, but didn't rush to answer his question, instead asking a counter-question. Before we start a difficult conversation to try to help my daughter save her family, I need to be sure that it makes sense. Just tell me honestly, is Timmy your illegitimate son? The man's indignation was boundless. No, of course not. I never even thought of cheating on Sarah. I love and respect her very much. My reaction to children is starting to scare me. Timmy ended up in our apartment because of a desperate situation. Sarah didn't even try to get along with him, although, as you probably noticed, he's a well-behaved, smart, and very charming boy. Jacob's answer calmed the anxious woman, and taking a deep breath, as if preparing to parachute, she decided to tell the truth. Well, as they say, everything hidden becomes known. As her husband, you have the right to know why my daughter avoids contact with children. I think I have the right to tell you her story, which at first was a happy fairy tale, and then turned into a terrible nightmare that destroyed her normal life. Sally grew up a wonderful and intelligent girl, a real joy to me and my husband. We had no trouble getting her into one of the best grammar schools in our city. Our family's wealth and the positions my husband and I held allowed Sally to fit in among what they call the golden youth. However, the grammar school had a very strong teaching staff, and grades weren't bought, as you might have thought. Children were skillfully engaged in learning, and our Sally was one of the best students in her class. She was even made a mentor for her deskmate, David. The boy was from a very good family, quite influential in our city. No joke, his father was the regional prosecutor. His mother held a significant position in the same department. In short, they lived better than our family, but they didn't hinder the friendship between their son and Sally. They genuinely welcomed her and communicated with me and my husband kindly, not condescendingly. When Sally was in the 10th grade, her father died suddenly. A blood clot detached, the autopsy showed. It was David's family who supported me and Sally after that loss. I am still grateful to them for that, because I was in such a state that I almost joined my husband. So, of course, I didn't object at all when Sally decided to marry David. So what if she was just over 18 at that moment? It was obvious that genuine feelings shouldn't be stood in the way of. David's parents also didn't object, and were even happy that my daughter became part of their family. A year after the wedding, Sally and David had twins, 2 boys, Alex and Johnny. They grew up healthy, cheerful, and sturdy, bringing joy to all of us. Sally couldn't get enough of her children. You know, Jake, she told me that when she was walking, pushing the stroller, her heart felt like it would leap out of her chest from happiness. Of course, I helped whenever I could. Her mother-in-law repeatedly offered Sally a reliable nanny, but my daughter always refused, and she mostly managed on her own. God knows what it cost her. But she didn't drop out of university and even managed without taking a leave of absence. And her father-in-law got her a prestigious, well-paid job in a position with strictly regulated working hours and a good benefits package and other perks. Of course, he had the means to do so, and there was no shame in giving his daughter-in-law a leg up. Sally was certainly not lacking in intelligence. Alex and Johnny were 6 years old when my daughter became pregnant again. David met the news with joy, and why would he be upset? The family relationship was wonderful, as far as I know. There wasn't a single quarrel between them, as if 2 halves were lucky enough to unite into one whole. I know many were envious, and some women tried to start a romance with David, but he didn't need anyone but my Sally. Everything was so perfect that there wasn't even a thought that everything would collapse in an instant due to a terrible tragedy. Sally had to go to the doctor, and David volunteered to pick up the boys from kindergarten himself. By a silly coincidence, his car broke down that day, and he decided not to call a taxi, but to walk the children home through the park. The weather was wonderful, and although the rides weren't working yet, there was a pizza place at the park exit that the boys eagerly wanted to go to. On the way, David met a friend, and while he was talking to him, the children, getting playful, ran out onto the lake. But the March ice turned out to be treacherously thin. My grandsons, as witnesses later recounted, didn't even have time to cry out. They went under the water instantly. David and his friend rushed to the water, but the boys could only be retrieved by divers who rushed to the scene of the tragedy. David later tried to justify himself, constantly repeating like a broken record that he was only distracted for a few seconds. But what was the point? Our boys drowned. It couldn't be fixed. My son-in-law was the first to tell me this bitter news, because he was worried about Sarah, and rightly so. I went to the private clinic where I knew Sally was at the time. My heart told me it would be better if doctors were nearby when the most terrible grief struck my daughter. Seeing me in the corridor, Sarah probably understood everything from my face. After hearing the news, she had a hysterical fit. They couldn't calm Sally down, even with a large dose of medication. She didn't make it home that evening. She ended up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. From the stress over her deceased sons, my daughter couldn't save the baby who was developing under her heart. The doctors didn't even consider him a child yet, and she had already lost him. At Alex and Johnny's funeral, Sally stood like a stone statue, without tears, without emotion, pale as death. The emptiness in her eyes was especially terrifying. David suffered no less, his hair turning grey at 25. He tried to take Sally's hand to support her, but she flinched away from him as if he were a leper. She never crossed the threshold of the apartment where she had lived with her husband and sons again. David tried to talk to her countless times, but it never worked. Sally simply erased her husband from her life. David's mother came to us, understanding that my daughter didn't want to see or hear her husband. She knelt, begged for her son's forgiveness, said he was unrecognizable, shared sad thoughts that he was on the verge and might leave this world. But Sarah didn't react. She could never forgive her husband for the death of their sons. David couldn't forgive himself either. He truly turned from a flourishing man into a pale imitation of his former self. Sally predictably quit her job, seemingly voluntarily, but in reality, everyone understood that she simply couldn't be under public scrutiny. Moreover, an unusual and unexpected problem arose. My daughter would approach a hysterical state if she went outside and saw a child. She changed her routes, but it's absolutely impossible to completely avoid seeing children. Once, Sally and I were in the elevator, and a neighbor with a little girl got in with us. Everything seemed normal, but I became anxious. After our fellow passengers got out, I looked at my daughter and saw blood running down her chin. She had bitten her lip so hard, trying to suppress a fit of hysteria. After that incident, my daughter stayed home for almost a month, 24 hours a day. I even called a specialist doctor, the best of the best, to the house. There were changes, but they weren't fast and not at all positive. After a period of apathy, my daughter became aggressive. She seemed to have an obsession, and the medication the doctor prescribed couldn't control it for long. Sally took the pills, fell into a state of indifference to everything for a few hours, and then started pacing the room, agonizing over something. Once, I saw her searching online for types of poisons, and I was genuinely scared. I realized that my daughter had decided to deal with the involuntary culprit of her children's death. I tried to be constantly by her side, watching over my daughter so she wouldn't do anything irreparable. One morning, Sally managed to leave the house while I was sleeping. Friends later told me that she ambushed David near his work and attacked him with her fists, screaming, "Why are you alive when our sons aren't?" I don't know. Maybe my friends exaggerated, but allegedly 4 strong men could barely pull her away from the bewildered David. He didn't even resist. When I came to get her, my daughter was sitting in a back room, where the smell of hated Corvalol and some other medications hung in the air, and she barely reacted to anything. They told me an ambulance had come and sedated Sally. Among friends and neighbours, of course, the only talk was about the accident with my grandsons and about Sarah going mad with grief. One day, David's father called me and strongly requested that my daughter and I leave the city. You don't refuse people like him. Besides, I myself was thinking about how to hide my daughter from memories, from sympathetic and curious glances. I quit my job, sold the apartment. Again, thanks to my son-in-law's parents, I managed to do it quickly and at a quite reasonable price, given the urgency. Sally and David were divorced in absentia. Again, thanks to his relatives. My daughter didn't even have to go anywhere. In the end, we moved to this city, away from everything that had been. Well, the rest, Jacob. You know yourself. You met her, and my daughter started coming back to life. Don't think Sally hates children. It's just that it still hurts her. She even refuses the possibility of becoming a mother again because of the fear of repeating the nightmare she went through. Mary fell silent. Telling her daughter's terrible story had exhausted the woman morally. Jacob noticed how pale her face had become and hurried to the kitchen to get her some water. Timmy was engrossed in playing on the phone, and the man, stroking his head, filled a glass and returned to the drawing room to Mary. "I'm sorry I made you remember everything." The woman, carefully drinking the water, said bitterly, "Ah, Jacob, if only it were possible to forget it at all. Perhaps you should have known about Sally's past sooner. I just couldn't bring myself to tell all this out loud. My daughter, as I understand it, still can't talk about it either." The man looked at the woman, puzzled, and admitted, "Honestly, I couldn't even imagine that such a tragedy could be hidden behind Sally's unwillingness to become a mother. I thought maybe she didn't want to ruin her figure. It's hard to imagine what she felt when she saw Timmy in our kitchen. What a surprise I managed to pull off, right on our wedding anniversary. How can I ask Sandra for forgiveness now so she understands me? I truly had nowhere else to bring Timmy, and for a number of reasons. The boy needs to be sheltered for a week or two in a comfortable and safe place where his parents' enemies wouldn't even think to look. It all happened almost by chance. I arrived at the branch office and on the street ran into an old friend I hadn't seen since demobilization. Vic is more than a friend to me. It's only thanks to him that I survived in the army. But that's a long story. And in civilian life, our paths diverged to our hometowns, and, as happens, we lost contact. I tried to find him on social media somehow. Maybe I should have searched more persistently, then I would have found him. Well, I got caught up building my career. In short, we hadn't seen each other for 15 years. And here, I meet Victor, in a city that's foreign to both of us. He's changed, of course, over the years, but I recognized him immediately. He almost walked right past me without noticing, but I stopped him. It turned out that Vic had come to solve problems for his sister and her husband. They got involved in a lawsuit with some not very reasonable people who were used to conducting all their affairs in a criminal manner. Vic was most worried about Timmy, his nephew. He explained to his sister that just in case, as a precaution, the child needed to be hidden, because these thugs could easily use him to influence the outcome in their favor. But they couldn't think of a safe place. and then I appeared out of nowhere. Vic's idea of taking Timmy out of the city seemed like an ideal option. Indeed, there were practically no threads that could lead the thugs to the child's trail. It's a good thing the boy has a strong character, growing into a real man. His parents and Vic told him he needed to stay with me for a little while, and he accepted this news calmly. I picked him up, like in a detective story, making sure not to be caught on city surveillance cameras. Vic and I agreed to connect in a week, and he's supposed to call me himself when the issue is resolved. Timmy, of course, is just an ideal boy. He settled into the unfamiliar place easily, and even went to bed by himself after brushing his teeth. All that's left is to wait for Vic's call. It's very easy for me to communicate with Timmy, but I have work on Monday, and I can hardly take him with me. Now I don't know what to do at all. Jacob fell silent, and then, unexpectedly for him and Mary, Sarah's voice rang out. "Nothing special. You'll go to work as usual, and I'll stay with Timmy. Just leave me the car so I don't have to drag the boy on public transport to Mum's and back." It turned out that, contrary to Mary's calculations, her daughter had already returned from the theatre, and, it seemed, had heard some part of her husband's story. To her mother's anticipating question, Sally explained, "I couldn't watch the play at the theatre. I went to the restroom, washed my face, and realized I couldn't go back and stare at the stage without even trying to understand the plot. I typed a message to Linda, apologizing, and came here. It turned out I came back just in time. Maybe I needed to hear Timmy's story from an outsider's perspective because, forgive me, Jake, I suspected you of cheating. I would hardly have believed you if you had told me all this yesterday. Today, I can look at this situation more rationally. Mum, you don't mind if I visit you with Timmy?" The woman, trying not to scare away the changes in her daughter's attitude towards children, spoke very cautiously. "Of course. Come visit?" Mary wanted to add something else, but her eyes stung betrayingly, and she decided to change the subject. "Sally, Jacob, aren't you hungry? I could eat something right now. Let's go to the kitchen. Besides, we need to see how Timmy is doing. If he's bored, I completely forgot about the rules of hospitality." The boy, seeing Sarah, didn't forget to greet her, and the woman's voice trembled slightly as she returned his greeting. Jacob, who now understood the reason for his wife's strange behavior, was now amazed by her resilience. Having gone through such a life trial, she had managed to endure and never tried to appeal to his pity or evoke sympathy by recounting what she had faced. Sarah gently but persistently declined Mary's attempts to feed everyone who had gathered in her kitchen that evening. "Thank you, Mum, for everything, but I think we should go home. I'll stop by tomorrow closer to lunchtime." Jacob, understanding that he had been forgiven by his wife, was very happy and warmly said goodbye to Mary, promising, "We'll all visit you together tomorrow. If you feel up to it and the weather is warm, we could go out into nature. How does that sound to you?" "Wonderful, Jacob. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch." After saying goodbye to the hostess, Sally, Jacob, and Timmy set off for the other end of the city. The man got behind the wheel and saw in the mirror how carefully his wife buckled the boy into the safety belt. It was obvious that for Sarah, this was an absolutely natural gesture, once honed to automatism. She was clearly a tender, caring mother, loved her children very much, and after the misfortune that befell her, she suffered in a way you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Carefully parking the car near the entrance, the man carried the sleeping Timmy up to the apartment in his arms. Sarah smoothed the rumpled sheet on the sofa, gently took off the boy's shoes, and covered him with a blanket. Watching his wife, Jacob felt incredible tenderness towards her. Unexpectedly, his beloved woman revealed a side of her personality he hadn't known. He realized he had made the absolutely right choice. Later, closing the kitchen door, they drank tea with the leftover cake, and, as if there had been no wall of misunderstanding between them yesterday, planned their Sunday schedule with jokes and kisses. The man finally decided to bring up the unpleasant topic and admitted, "Sandra, I was a real idiot. I almost ruined everything with my action, and I want to say a huge thank you for your understanding." His wife smiled. "Well, honestly, I also overreacted. So I suggest we forget about it. Let's move on." The weekend passed cheerfully and even better than the couple had expected. They managed to get Mary out for a walk too. She was less happy about the sunny May day than about her daughter's happy eyes. Sally gladly answered Timmy's questions and also constantly watched to make sure he wasn't in danger. However, neither her mother nor her husband dared to make comments or reproach her for being overprotective. Timmy, it seemed, didn't even notice that he was being surrounded with maximum care. By agreement with Sarah, he called her by her first name, not using the word aunt, and seemed quite content with his unexpected journey. After taking Mary home after their outing, the trio lingered because there was simply no chance of leaving the woman without being fed. However, no one objected. Late in the evening, as Sally was putting Timmy to bed, the boy quietly asked her, "Do you think my parents are okay? Will I see them soon?" Trying to keep her voice firm and convincing, Sarah replied, "Of course they are fine. Very soon they will finish all their business, and you will meet them." The calmed boy fell asleep. Sally, afraid of waking the child, beckoned her husband to the kitchen and began questioning him about the situation Timmy's parents were involved in. "Sandra, honestly, I don't even know all the details. Vic gave me a very brief overview, but I understood that some real thugs were after his sister and her husband." The woman began to ask clarifying questions, unexpected for her husband. "Are these thugs from the city you went to, or are they outsiders? Did they call each other any nicknames?" Jacob told her everything he knew, but the information Sally received wasn't enough, and she suddenly asked, "Can you contact Victor urgently? I need to get a few clarifications from him to try to help Timmy's parents. Of course, he's doing well here and is quite comfortable, I hope. But it shouldn't be that a mother and son are separated for long." From Sarah's voice, it was impossible to guess how deeply she had taken Timmy's and his parents' situation to heart. But now, knowing his wife's past, Jacob understood how difficult it was for her. "Actually, Victor gave me a password to a chat for such a case, where all messages automatically disappear. I think I can try to contact him." The man opened the necessary website, entered the details he had memorized at his army friend's request, and a few minutes later exclaimed joyfully, "It worked! Vic greeted me." Sally thoughtfully advised, "Jake, ask him a question whose answer will let you know for sure if it's your friend you're talking to. And if there's even the slightest doubt, immediately close the site and take the SIM card out of the phone." Alarmed by his wife's suspicions, Jacob quickly typed a few phrases and waited impatiently for a reply. Reading the received message, the man exhaled with relief. "Everything's fine. It's definitely Vic," he replied with our code phrase. Sarah nodded and asked, "Excellent. Write to Victor that your wife will be chatting with him now and give me the phone. I'll find out everything I need from your friend myself." "Nothing surprises me anymore." Jacob handed the smartphone to his wife. She chatted with the stranger for quite a long time, then grabbed a pen, quickly wrote down a number on a bread package, tore off the edge of the paper with the numbers, clenched it in her hand, and handed the phone back to her husband. "That's it. I'm going to the bathroom. I need to make a call. Write to Vic to log into this messenger in an hour. Then, I hope, I'll be able to tell him something specific. Sarah left the kitchen and went to the bathroom, which had the best soundproofing in the apartment. Taking several deep breaths, the woman dialed the number of her former father-in-law, which she had memorized. The phone was unavailable. Sally gathered all her willpower and dialed her former husband's number. Soon, his voice came through the receiver. "Hello, don't be silent." Sarah's voice was hoarse with emotion, and she replied, "David, hello, it's Sally. I need your help. More precisely, perhaps your father can resolve the situation, but I can't reach him. The robot says the phone is out of range." The man's demanding tone softened noticeably. "Sally, it's good to hear from you. My father is abroad right now, but if you tell me what the problem is, I will certainly try to provide all possible assistance. I work in the regional prosecutor's office now, so all my connections are at your service." "Thank you," the woman replied, told him everything she had learned, and dictated the number she had written down. "Okay, Sally, I understand everything. It's not the simplest matter, but it's solvable. I think, in the end, there's a more influential force for every thug. I'll try to help. Warn this friend of yours that I'll call him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, depending on how things turn out, from my phone, and he can safely answer the call." "Thank you, David." Without waiting for her former husband's reply, Sarah ended the conversation, which had been very difficult for her, and washed her face with ice-cold water, hoping it would bring her at least some semblance of emotional balance. Even during the conversation with David, she had wanted to apologize to him, but couldn't. The bitter resentment towards the man's inattentiveness, because of which she had lost her children, still burned in the woman's heart. At the same time, Sally understood perfectly well that without the intervention of her former husband, who had extensive connections in the region, Timmy's family was practically doomed, and she wanted to protect the boy and try to save his parents. The woman sat in the bathroom for some time, regulating her heartbeat with breathing exercises. Seeing that almost an hour had passed, she returned to the kitchen to Jacob and informed him of what David had said. The man wrote the information his wife had received to his friend and hugged Sally tightly. He saw how drawn his beloved woman looked in the last hour and didn't know how to help her. He wanted to protect her from all misfortunes, but instead, Sally had had to, as Jacob easily guessed, turn to the person who had almost completely destroyed her life. The conversation had agitated the woman. She freed herself from Jacob's embrace and automatically began clearing the table, not paying attention to the fact that she was throwing away food her husband hadn't touched at all. Finally, the man took her hand and suggested, "Stop this fuss. It's been a difficult day and we need to rest." Even listening to her husband's peaceful breathing as he slept, Sally couldn't calm down. Images of her little ones appeared before her eyes, as if in reality. Here are Alex and Johnny smiling at her with toothless grins, then going to kindergarten for the first time and, pressing their faces to the window, waving their little hands at her, giving her cards for Mother's Day. Here, clearly having conspired, instead of falling asleep, they applaud loudly and in unison when she starts singing them a lullaby. How many pleasant moments were there, so carefully stored somewhere far away in her memory, and how roughly everything was erased by an accident. How many times she had warned her sons not to take risks, and they still didn't listen. However, what was the point of being angry now? Alex and Johnny were gone, and their father was now the only hope that Timmy would be able to hug his mother very soon. Let David at least be able to help this woman, completely unknown to Sally. Timmy stirred and began mumbling something, and Sarah, slipping out from under her husband's arm, hurried to the boy. She carefully adjusted the blanket he had almost thrown onto the floor, felt his forehead, afraid that the child had a fever, and sighed with relief, feeling that, based on her experience, everything was fine. Timmy opened his eyes, and Sally, sitting on the edge of the sofa, began quietly singing a lullaby. The boy had fallen asleep long ago, but the woman remained sitting beside him, and she so wanted the child to return to his parents as soon as possible, and at the same time she understood that she would desperately miss being with him. When the sky, visible through the crack between the curtains, lightened, Sarah quietly went to the kitchen to make herself coffee and work on documents, because there was no point in going back to sleep. In these early morning hours, perhaps somewhere far away, issues directly concerning Timmy's fate were being resolved. But Sally was powerless to influence anything. She had already done everything she could, overcoming deadly resentment, and now all that remained was to wait for the result. Carefully studying the papers, the woman made notes in the margins, wrote down her suggestions on a separate sheet, and, neatly putting everything back in the zippered folder, began preparing breakfast, trying not to make noise. She had already decided to ask her boss for time off, so as not to overly tire the boy with trips to unfamiliar places. Waiting for a convenient time to send messages, Sally typed to her boss that she would send the prepared documents through her husband, and began thinking about how to please the little guest, who, of course, was worried about the forced separation from his parents, although he tried to be brave. When Jacob, showered but still yawning, looked into the kitchen, Sally had almost everything ready. She invited her husband to the table and asked, "Jake, stop by Mr. Harrison's on your way and give him the folder with the documents from me. I've already warned him that I won't be able to come into work for a few days. If he needs to review anything, he can send it to my email or forward it through you. In the worst case, of course, I'll come by, but I'd rather not stress Timmy. I wanted to stop by Mum's with him and then go to a children's entertainment centre. Why should he just play computer games all the time? Let him have fun, run around, so he doesn't think about sad things. It seemed like he was having nightmares last night." Jacob agreed with his wife's plan and, quickly finishing breakfast, thanked her and started getting ready for work. Timmy woke up much later, but Sally didn't think of waking him. She wanted the boy to feel no discomfort. The woman fed the child and then suggested, "Let's stop by my mum's for a little while, and then we'll go somewhere to relax." A message arrived on Sarah's phone, and she smiled, seeing the notification of money being credited. Jacob had taken care to ensure his wife wouldn't have financial problems. The woman smiled and asked the boy, "Would you like to go to an amusement park? It's not very far from the city, and there are lots of options for fun there. A fun house, rope courses, and I think even a climbing wall. Do you like active things like that? Or maybe you prefer movies?" "That's fine too. I haven't seen a movie on a big screen in ages." Timmy admitted shyly, "Honestly, I'd rather go to the amusement park." "Well, then that's where we'll go." Mary was very happy when her daughter came to her with the boy. This meant Sally had believed her husband and hadn't acted rashly, demanding that the child be placed somewhere. From her traumatic memories, she saw that Sally seemed to have thawed even after a short time with Timmy, and she could barely bring herself to make them leave as soon as possible. "Honey, I feel absolutely wonderful today. Go, have fun. If anything, of course, I'll call. But really, don't worry. I feel like I even have more strength today after yesterday's walk." Turning to the boy, Mary asked, "Timmy, please, have a good time for yourself and for me." The boy nodded completely seriously and promised, "I'll ask Sarah to take pictures and send them to you. You have a smartphone, right?" The woman smiled and praised him. "Well done, that's a great idea." "Exactly. It will be like I'm having fun with you. Sarah, check. Is your phone charged?" Sarah reassured her mother, saying she could charge her phone in the car at any moment. Soon the guests left Mary, and she, left alone, began to dream that her daughter would finally decide to become a mother again. It was clear to the woman that Sally was excellent at getting along with children, but she had suffered for so many years, deliberately avoiding contact with them. May everything turn out well for my long-suffering girl, Mary prayed aloud, hoping that this request would be heard somewhere above. Sally, driving the car with extra caution, was taking Timmy to have fun and felt the weight of the voluntarily taken responsibility pressing down on her more and more. The boy first asked to go on the rope course, and the woman agreed, although at the sight of the ropes stretched high up, she wanted to grab the child in her arms and not let go. Sarah watched the boy playing without taking her eyes off him, and occasionally took photos, but didn't dare to get distracted to send particularly expressive shots to her mother. The woman felt that if she was distracted for even a few seconds, something bad would happen to the boy. The thought came to her of the degree of despair Timmy's mother must have been in to agree to give her son to a practically unknown person. Such an action could only be decided upon due to a real threat to the child's life and health. So she, Sally, had no right to let down the woman who knew the bare minimum of information: name, surname, age, and that the unfortunate woman and her husband were involved in a situation they couldn't get out of on their own. However, Sally, no matter how you looked at it, was even in a better position. Veronica, Timmy's mother, knew even less about the people sheltering her son. The Monday filled with entertainment flew by unnoticed. The boy, tired from numerous active outdoor activities, fell asleep after a hearty dinner and rested completely peacefully until morning without crying out or waking up. Jacob and Sarah talked quietly in the kitchen. The woman enthusiastically told him about how bravely Timmy conquered the attractions and showed him photos. Tomorrow, after visiting Mom, I want to take our guest to our museums and then go to the cinema, or the other way around, whatever Timmy wants. If you can, join us. It will be fun. He's so funny and sometimes says such profound things. He told me today that adults deliberately try to look serious so people will be afraid of them and no one will bother them. Can you imagine? The man agreed that there was some sense in this conclusion and suggested, "Sandra, let's go to bed too, like Timmy, because tomorrow, as I understand it, will be just as busy." Neither Tuesday nor Wednesday brought news from David or the boy's relatives. Although the child visited various entertainment and educational places, his mood got worse each day. He thought and felt sad more and more often. Jacob and Sarah understood that the boy missed his family more and more, but couldn't influence the situation. Only on Thursday, when Sally and Timmy were visiting Mary, did the long-awaited call come. David informed his ex-wife that the main difficulties were behind them and warned, "There are still some minor points to resolve, but that's it. The main thing is that the boy is no longer in danger. His parents have already set off towards the city where you live now. I've told them to call you in advance when they're approaching and confirm the address. In short, I will, of course, see this matter through to the end. You don't need to worry." Sarah sincerely thanked her ex-husband. "Thank you, David, and forgive me for everything." The man's voice was ringing when he replied to the woman who had caused him so much pain. "Sally, you can't imagine how happy I am to hear from you, even under these circumstances. I wish you happiness, and if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll always be happy to help." Sarah said goodbye to her ex-husband, and Mary, who had overheard her daughter's conversation, couldn't believe her ears. It seemed her Sally had just had a perfectly normal conversation with the man she had once loved deeply and then hated. "Mom, we need to leave. Timmy's parents are on their way and I need to bathe him." The child understood that he would soon see his mom and dad and began jumping around the room, shouting, "Hooray!" Sally could barely calm him down. In her joy at the successful resolution of the situation, Mary gave the boy her photo and a collection of stamps he had liked as a keepsake. "Here, Timmy, you can look at the album and remember me." The child promised, "Thank you, but I won't forget you, Grandma Mary, even without the stamps." Taking advantage of the moment, Sarah called her husband to tell him the good news, but it turned out he already knew. "Sandra, Vic already told me that thanks to your help, everything was resolved. I'm taking a taxi home now to prepare for the guest's arrival." Sarah was a little sad to part with the boy who had awakened memories of the happiest days spent with her sons, and she invited him to visit a toy store on the way. "You know, I really want to give you something too. Choose whatever you want." The boy didn't resist, but, apparently shy, he didn't spend long walking among the shelves of toys and soon picked up a robot from the shelf that was far from the most expensive. On the way to the checkout, Sarah put a plane in the basket that Timmy had once talked about admiringly and a few board games. "Oh, so much!" the child exclaimed in surprise. "What a holiday today!" Sarah agreed. "Yes, Timmy, today is a very big holiday." By the time the doorbell rang, the boy was freshly bathed and cutlery was neatly arranged on the table. Veronica, as soon as she crossed the threshold, rushed to her son, hugging and showering him with kisses. The boy's father handed Sarah flowers, and Victor gave Jacob a strong, manly hug. After Timmy took on the role of an adult and introduced his parents to the apartment's hosts, everyone sat down at the table. Veronica offered to help Sally and admitted, "If it weren't for your kindness, I don't even know how we would have managed at all. I can't express my gratitude enough. My husband and I have gathered some money to compensate for Timmy's expenses and your inconvenience." Sally turned pale and replied, "Veronica, please put that envelope away immediately. Don't insult me with this gesture. Your boy will be going to school soon. Spend this money on him. And if it's not too much trouble, sometimes send my husband and me photos of him. That would be the best thank you." A flustered Veronica burst into tears and hugged Sarah. When Timmy, concerned about his mom and Sally's long absence from the table, looked into the kitchen, he saw that the women were crying, unable to hold back tears, and asked like an adult, "What happened? Did you get hurt? Did you get cut? Did you get burned?" Sally and Veronica simultaneously wiped away their tears. His mother comforted her son. "Everything's fine, darling. Everything's just wonderful." Hugging the boy, she lifted him up and twirled him around. Sarah watched the happy people and felt no envy, but wished that all the troubles of this family would remain in the past. After the guests left, Sarah leaned trustingly against her husband and confessed to him, "You know, I think I'm ready for motherhood. Timmy proved to me that children are the greatest happiness." The man didn't try to dissuade his wife. Soon, Sarah delighted him and Mary with the news of her pregnancy. Exactly on time and without any complications, the woman gave birth to a daughter. They named the girl Victoria, in honor of Jacob's army friend, and as a symbol of victory over the terrible memories of the past.